Good day, grade sixes. Today we're going to find fractional parts. We're just going to go over that again, and we're going to look at some decimals. Can you all remember our fraction pirate? Can you remember that he looks like this with a big ob for a nose and a multiplication and a division sign? Can you remember what he does and how he works? Let's quickly recap. Okay, if I draw my pirate face, and I can see there's his nose. So I would have a division sign as a tooth because he's got a big smiley face with a funny old tooth there, and a multiplication sign for an ear. So how does it work? Very easy. I say 20 divided by 4 equals 5 times 3. 20 divided by 4 times 3 equals, what is 20 divided by 4 is 5, times 3 equals 15. So 3/4 of 20 equals 15. Let's think of a few examples. I've got 16, and I know I've got to divide it by 8, and I've got to times it by 4. So what is 16 divided by 8? Gives me 2 times 4 gives me 8. So 8 would be a half of 16. If you look, 4 over 8 actually is a half. Okay, let's look at the next one. 100 divided by 20 times 5. What is 100 divided by 20? 100 divided by 20 is 5. 5 times 5 gives me 25. Well done, guys. Well done, guys. You got this one right. Look at how happy you are because you can remember your fraction pirate. Okay, let's look at how to add fractions with different denominators. You've got to find the lowest common multiplier or denominator. Say, for instance, I've got a sum like this. Can you see? First thing I do is I put on my math eyes and I observe and I see I've got a problem here because my denominators are different. I have to have them all the same. So I've got to find one that they all divide into. Very easy. I just multiply them with each other. 2 times 4 times 3. And I know that they will fit into each other. What is 2 times 4 is 8. What is 8 times 3? 24. So 24 is my lowest common denominator. Let's look at this one. 6 and a 2 and a 3. So I say 6 times 2 times 3. Because then I know if I multiply them with each other, the one that the answer everyone would fit into. What is 6 times 2 is 12 times 3 is 36. That's correct. Look at this one. I've got a 3 and a 4 and a 6. So 3 times 4 times 6. What is 3 times 4 equals 12. What is 12 times 6 equals 72. That's quite a big number. I want to show you guys a trick. If you have your denominators like that, order them from biggest to smallest. 6 and a 4 and a 3. So what is 6 times 4? It's 24. What is 24 times 3? Let's quickly have a look. 4 times 3 is 12. 72. Absolutely makes no difference in which order you put them. It just makes it easier to multiply the first two and then multiply it with a smaller one at the end. Let's look at the sum I've got here. Now, I've got a group of fractions. Predict which one do you think is the largest and circle your prediction. Now rename the fractions in the workspace below so that each fraction in the group has the same denominator. Use a different color to circle the largest fraction. Okay, so let's predict. Which one do you think is going to be the biggest one? Is it a half? Is it 2/3? I think 2/3 are maybe a little bit bigger than the half, so that's my lucky one so far. And what about 3/9? That sounds great. I think maybe that is a third, so maybe that is the smallest one. So I think this one is the largest one. Okay, but now we have to put them all over the same denominators. Otherwise, we'll never be able to see which one is the largest one. So remember my trick. I start with the biggest one, and I have a 3, and I have a 2. What is 3 times 9? Equals 27. Times 2, 27 times 2. 7 times 2 is 14. 4 plus 1 is 5. My LCM is 54. So that is the smallest number that all 3 of those numbers can fit in. So obviously they must be at the bottom. Can you remember what we did with equivalent fractions? What we do at the top, we do at the bottom. So what do I do with 2 to get to 54? I don't know what to do. I say, how many times is 2 going to 54? And I actually can do a little calculation here. 2 goes into 5 twice. 2 goes into 14, 7. There's no remainders. So 2 times 27 gives me 54. And what I do at the bottom, I must do on top. So 1 times 27 equals 27. Great, let's work on this one now that I think is the biggest one. How many times does 3 go into 54? Let's do a calculation here at the bottom. Sometimes you can't work this out in your head. You've got to do a calculation. 3 goes into 24. 3 times 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 3 times 8 is 24. Is there any remainders? I hope not, because otherwise there's a problem. So it's 18. 3 times 18 gives me 54. What I do at the bottom, I must do on top. 3 times 18 is 54. 2 times 18, oh, I've got to work out another one. That's why it's sometimes easy to make sure that you have a scrap piece of paper with you. 36. Okay, now this one we can do with mental maths. How many times does 9 go into 54? Or what must I do to 9 to get it to 54? Remember, you can only times or divide when it comes to equivalent fractions. I would say this would be 9 times 6 is 54. So 3 times 6 would be 18. So my prediction that the middle one is the biggest one is correct. And the question they said is use a different color to circle the largest fraction. And that's what I did. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Let's quickly see what is required from us. Look at each group of fractions. Predict which you think is the largest and circle your prediction. Sounds very similar to the previous one. Now rename the fractions in the workspace below so that each fraction in the group has the same denominator. Use a different color to circle the largest fraction. Are there any surprises? Oh my word. Let's quickly see if we can remember how to do this. I think, now you guys must help me here. I've got 2 over 5. I've got a half, which I think is a bit bigger than 2 over 5 because I've got 2 sweets. I've got 3 left, then if I only have 2 and there's 5. And I've got a third on this side. So my prediction is the biggest one would be a half. Okay, let's work at my common denominators because now I must make sure that everything is under the same, is the same. So I must work at the lowest common denominator. Remember my trick? I start with my 5, and I have a 3, and I have a 2. What is 5 times 3 is 15, times 2 equals 30. So 30 would be my lowest common denominator. And just because I know that I'm right, I'm going to put them all here at the bottom. Okay, let's look at equivalent fractions again. What do I do with 5 to get to 30? 5 times what is 30? 5 times 6. So what I do at the bottom, I must do at the top. So if 5 times 6 is 30, 2 times 6 is 12. What do I do with the 2 to get to 30? 2 times 15 gives me 30. So it would be 1 times 15. So far my prediction is right. What do I do with 3 to get to 30? Times 10. 1 times 10. So my prediction is absolutely correct. This one is definitely the biggest fraction. Okay, let's look at a word problem. Guys, remember we were talking about word problems for the past few weeks. I'll just get my pen here. Sarah gave her some money for her birthday. Sarah saved half of the money and she spent quarter of the money on a book. That left her with 50 rand in her purse. How much money did her gran give her? Now, it's very easy to say, oh, okay, 50 rand and a half of 50 rand equals 25, because now I know my trick. 25 and a quarter of 50 is, oh, now this is where I get stuck a little bit because I don't know 50 divided by 4. And that's normally where we get stuck when we have a word problem. You know why? Because you haven't read it properly. So I'm going to rub it out because that's the first thing I do when I get nervous in a test is I answer the first thing that comes to mind. So let me read properly. Sarah's gran gave her some money for her birthday. It was her birthday. She saved half of the money and she spent a quarter of the money on a pretty book. There, I'm drawing the book. Can you see? That left her, now there's my key word, with 50 rand in her purse. Here's Sarah's beautiful purse. She had 50 rand that is in there. That is what she had left. So let's look at my circle I've got here. Sarah's gran gave her some money for her birthday. She saved half the money. So this is the portion that she saved. And she spent a quarter of the money on a book. And here's the money that she spent on a book. There's her book. What has she got left? She has left 50 rand in her purse. So this is the portion that Sarah has in her purse. Look, there's her purse again. Remember, I always say to you, try and draw a picture. So now it's easy to say, if I've got 50 rand there, how much is the other quarter? This book would also then be 50 rand, isn't it? And she saved half the money the gran gave her. So if 50 rand she was left with and 50 rand she spent on a book, that was half the money. How much is the other half of the money? It's 100 rand. So Sarah's gran gave her 200 rand. After this lockdown holiday that you guys are listening to me, you'll be able to do word problems, because every week I'm going to challenge you with a word problem and that you have to really think about and really read carefully. I'm very proud of you guys. You guys are doing very well, and I'm going to put some extra worksheets on that we can also do this. Okay, we're going to just touch on fractions, decimals, and percentages. Let's look at a fraction. A fraction would be something over something. It's got a numerator and it's got a denominator. A percentage is a numerator that is over 100. So you must always make sure that it's over 100. So there, this person has already worked it out for you. So if your denominator is 100, sorry, not numerator, your denominator is 100, your percentage would be 89%. That percent means of 100. You see how I'm saying it? 89 of 100. And your decimal fraction would just be, see where the comma is? How many spaces is it behind the comma on the right-hand side? If it has 2 spaces, you know it was 89 over 100, because those 2 spaces indicate the spaces on the right-hand side of the comma. Let's look at this one. Yeah, they only give me the percentage. But remember, that is of 100. Of 100. So I can say this is 58 of 100. Now let's look at my decimal fractions. Remember now, we have 2 spaces, 2 zeros. So if I draw my comma, I know I need 2 spaces on the right of the comma. And I've got that. I start always from my units. And then I write the 5. And because it is a fraction, there's no holes. So it becomes a 0. Shall I do that one again? Let's try this one again. I've got 58%. So I've got 58% means over 100. Now I've got to work on a decimal fraction. I've got 2 spaces at the right of the comma. Start with my units. I write an 8. Then I do my tens, which is a 5. Can you see any holes in this fraction? No, this is a portion of. So there's no holes. So I write a 0 there. Okay, let's complete the following. Half can be written as a fraction. A fraction would be a half. 1 of 2. As a decimal would be 0,5. Why? Because a half, another way of writing it, if I put it over 10, equals 5 over 10, or it can equals 50 over 100. So as a decimal, we know that it's got one portion there, 1 0. Now I'm going to have 1 0 on the right of my comma, and I'm going to write my unit down on my 1 0. And because it is a fraction, it will have no holes, so that's where that 0 comes from. As a percentage, I can see it is 50 over 100. So it would be 50%. Let's look at a quarter. A quarter is a 1 over 4. So that would illustrate a quarter. That is a quarter, and that is a quarter. As a decimal, it is 0,25. And as a percentage, it is 25%. That I will explain to you next time when we go a little bit deeper into what decimal fractions are all about. Guys, I had a lovely time. Thank you for everything, and I hope to see you soon. Please give me a call, and please have a look on Teams, because this video will be on Teams, and I'll put some worksheets for you. Bye.